A very good evening, everyone. I'll request everyone to kindly settle down. Respected RMD and CEO, Shri Debadatha Chand, Executive Directors, Shri Lalit Tyagi, Shri Sanjay Mudliar, Shri Lal Singh, CVO Shri Surendra Dikshit, our esteemed customers, partners, and my colleagues from the bank who have joined us physically at our corporate office and through the webcast. A very warm welcome to the April edition of Leadership Chronicles, an interactive platform through which our customers and staff members get the opportunity to interact with eminent leaders and business icons. Today, we have the honor of hosting an esteemed leader whose extraordinary journey and visionary guidance have made a lasting impact on the sphere of banking and finance. Please join me in warmly welcoming our distinguished guest, Padma Bhushan Shri K.V. Kamath, sir. May I have a round of applause? We are honored to have you, sir. Apart from the people who have joined us physically here at MSG Hall, we also have our esteemed customers, partners, and staff members spread across geographies who have joined us today through the live webcast. Without further ado, may I now request our MD and CEO, Shri Debadatha Chand, sir, to kindly grace the stage and welcome Shri Kamath with his address.
All Borodian friends, esteemed customer, let me on the behalf of the bank welcome Sri K.V. Kamath, somebody who is the doyen of the Indian banking industry, a Padma Bhushan, and somebody not only renowned here in India, also in abroad in equal measures. It's a great honor and privilege, sir, to welcome you to Bank of Baroda building here today. Here are the people who are my colleagues here who are present here, and a lot of colleagues in the branches also, they are connected through webcast. Similarly, the customer also, they are connected through the webcast. It's my honor also to introduce his credential that Sri K.V. Kamath is an Indian banker who started his career in 1971. And just sir to tell you that I was born in 1971. So he started his career in ICICI at that time in project finance in 1971. Then 1988 he moved to Asian Development Bank and spent several years in Southeast Asia. In May 1996, Sri Kamath returned to ICICI Bank as its managing director and chief executive. He at that time initiated a lot of processes of series of acquisition of non-banking financial company in 1996 to 1998 and led the way to the formation of the ICICI Bank, which is a global conglomerate now. In 2015, he was appointed as the first president of the new development bank set up by the BRICS countries, from where he retired in 2020. He also served as chairman of Infosys, and currently he is the chairman of the National Bank for Financing Infrastructure and Development, the NAFID, and Geo Financial Services. As I said earlier, he is a Padma Bhushan, one of the highest civilian honors of the country in 2008, his contribution towards the growth of the Indian banking industry. Sri K.V. Kamath is academically distinguished, holding an engineering degree from NIT Surathkal, a post-graduation from the Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad. Sir, on behalf of the Bank of Baroda, I extend our heartfelt gratitude for gracing us with your august presence today and looking forward for an inspirational and energizing interaction. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, sir. I now request our esteemed guest, Shri K.V. Kamath, sir, and Shri Virendra Somanshi, head WMS and Capital Markets, to kindly come on the stage and commence the much-awaited fireside chat. We would have a short Q&A after the fireside chat. I request all attendees who've joined us through the webcast to kindly leave your questions in the chat box that's provided on the screen. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. So our today's special guest of Leadership Chronicles is someone who has spent his very early days in Mangalore, studied in Kannada medium government school, and then went on to study, like Chansab said, to NIT Surathkal and later on to IIM Ahmedabad. He is well known to take the ICICI group and make it as a global giant, but I think he stands tall in the industry for his talent to identify and groom business leaders very early. Many of them are the women leaders who have now become the CEOs and business leaders of many Indian organizations. To his credit, he has a big impact not only in the financial services sector, but many other things, and we'll talk about some of them now. So, if you're okay, sir, should we
Please.
straight get into the question?
Thank you.
Yeah, we have three sets for this. Today we will basically get your views on the Indian economy and how the growth rates are looking for the future. The second part is we'll also learn from your personality traits, leadership styles, and some finer details there. And the last one is a bit of a fun round where we'll ask you rapid questions and not allow you much time to think. So let me just dive straight into the first question.
Sure.
If you go back to the economic history of various nations, there is predominant domination by certain countries in certain decades. So as an example, the entire 80s was dominated by Japan, and then because of the whole TMT wave, the US in a way dominated in the 90s, and of late in the last 2 decades we've seen China really making rapid strides. India post liberalization has also had a rapid growth, and now many pundits are also saying that now that we are the 5th largest economy, the next 2 decades are meant for India. You've been a big believer in the India growth story, so how do you see India for the next couple of decades? But more importantly, what are the opportunities which will evolve for all businesses in India?
Yeah, thank you, and I'm delighted to be here. Thank you for your kind words, Mr. Chan. I'll put it this way. There is so much to do in India that will drive growth, and I'll put it in context. So when the Prime Minister says Amrit Kal and puts a 25-year period, if you look around us, that's what it will take to invest for this country to transform, and that is investing at speed. So there's no lack of opportunity. There is no lack of any area of, I would say, growth which we need to invest in. Every single area needs it. Let me put it in context. So we are a roughly 4 trillion economy. As we head towards 8 trillion, things won't double. They will probably, in terms of need, go up by a factor of 2.5 to 3 times. And this is seen anecdotally in all countries which have grown. So the road length, for example, will have to be not 2 times, but maybe 3 times what it is today. Railways probably more than 3 times, and so on and so forth. So every single area of activity that you have will have to grow multiple times, including manufacturing capacity. So all this infrastructure doesn't happen on its own. So you'll need the steel, the cement, and so on. So we are looking at a tremendous time to invest with no rest, as it were, for 25 years, if we have to get to a 25 trillion economy. And that's what we have set as an objective. Now, setting a 25 trillion goal would have been empty if we did not have this opportunity. So we have this opportunity. So we have to make it possible. And I believe we will make it possible. And what we have seen in the last few years is we have prepared ourselves for this. If we had not prepared ourselves, it would not have happened. So we have prepared ourselves. We have an opportunity. I think we are disciplined enough to grow. And when growth happens, we have seen in other countries, it stays for a long period of time. 20-25 years is a good horizon. So we have truly Amrit Kal ahead. And the growth rate probably will be what we want to set it at. And I think it will be higher than what we are currently talking of. The external world is talking of 7% growth and so on. I believe our growth will be higher than that, because it's not only infrastructure, manufacturing and other things that will drive us, but also the digital economy. The digital economy, I expect, which is today 8% of the overall economy, to grow to anything between 25 and 35% of the economy. And it will be, as I say, it will sit on top of what growth we assume. So if you assume 7% as growth, you will have another 25% of that adding to overall growth. So you're almost in double digits. So I would plan double-digit growth for a very long period of time, and that's the India where all of us and our families and children will prosper in.
No, absolutely. In fact, you mentioned about the digital economy, and you have been one of the tech-savvy business leaders all through. And currently, the whole globalization and the technology is taking center stage. With new platforms like AI and ChatGPT becoming mainstream. So, it's a very volatile and ever-changing world now. So, what do you think are the levers and skill sets needed for one to cope up with this whole, VUCA world, as we say, and for our employees as such? How do we get future ready for this volatility?
Yeah, there are two parts to this. One is indeed the people who work for a bank, and the second is the bank itself in terms of what it does to prepare itself for technology. I'll give an example, and then that should put in context where we are, not your bank, but the banking system in general, not only here but around the world. But I'll spend 30 seconds or 1 minute to explain where we were in 1997-98 when ICICI Bank said we will put technology, because we had nothing else to compete. We had some 50 or 100 branches, so you know what that means. So we said we will add 1,000 ATMs in the first year. The question was, is the customer ready to use an ATM? And my colleagues told me, no, the customer cannot use an ATM. But my colleagues were proven completely wrong, because the customer not only used it, he asked for more. So we had to virtually double. We put 1,000 ATMs in the first year, double it the next year, and so on and so forth. So we tend to underestimate either our customer or our own people and their ability to learn and get on top. So who fails? Who fails is basically the bank itself or its leadership. But I will use a global example. So when we were then putting technology in terms of, this is ATMs, putting technology in, to core platforms and so on, anywhere I looked, it was only mainframes in the global world. Looked very nice and run beautifully, but we didn't have the money to put a mainframe in India. So we said we need to look at other things. So we put, in those days, Sun Microsystem boxes. So in a way, those boxes are even today what drive almost all large institutions in India. No mainframes at all. The cost of putting those boxes was 1/20th of a mainframe. So we could, in India, affordably put technology in. So we did that, and we could grow. And of course, everybody else then came on, core banking came on and so on. Now you are in a similar situation, because the core platform you use is still, as I said, a variant of Sun Microsystem, because that company has been acquired by Oracle. And so whether it is XYZ or the box, you're using a box to run your technology, fit for purpose today and so on. But the new guys, the fintech startups, are using something entirely different. It is entirely cloud-based. It is at a fraction of the cost of what you would do. Again, I would say 1/10 the cost of what we saw as the mainframe thing is again happening today. So and this is not only here, it's happening around the world also. If the financial sector around the world doesn't embrace this new opportunity, there will be other people who will try to compete with you. But if you embrace a new technology, so I think the acceptance of new technology has to come from the leadership of an institution. I think at the customer level or at the staff level, they make that jump very, very quickly. It's not a challenge. So I would leave this thought to leadership in all financial institutions to look at when and how do you make that jump. Technology is available today to completely migrate what you have to systems which will cost you 1/10 of what we are running at.
No, clearly, and you mentioned about some of the global things. In your earlier hat as the past president of the BRICS Bank, you had exposure across multiple countries in terms of whether it's sustainable goals or development goals. So what were the key challenges you went through? Because when you do this 4-5 country BRICS, the challenges completely differ. And how did you sort of mitigate some of those, meet those challenges?
Yeah, the BRICS Bank experience was very, for me, a learning experience, because first you have to learn different cultures and bind them together to develop, and very quickly. So we did that pretty quickly. We used entirely new technology. We used only cloud-based software. We didn't have a consultant. We did everything with a group of 3 or 4 people. The entire BRICS Bank technology was implemented with 3 or 4 people at a cost of less than $1 million, probably $500,000 to $600,000. So it only shows that you can do things very quickly. And there's one other learning that came, and I'll come to your point in a moment, which I think is very important, because all of us in India, the country is rated at BBB minus, it's investment grade. I think it is grossly under, it is not our true, we should be at somewhere near an A as I see it today. So when we went to and set up BRICS Bank, the question was, how will you fund yourself? And we were going to be in the global markets. So we have a set of countries where the highest rating is A minus, one country, and there are 2 countries at BB, one at BBB minus and one I think somewhere in between. So if you look at this rating, we should have gotten at best BBB minus, the BRICS Bank. But it was possible when 5 countries came together, presented ourselves properly and so on, our rating was AA plus. It is just 1 notch below the best. What a World Bank or others were having, 1 notch below, which meant that we were paying hardly 10 basis points more than others. And we saved that by running very lean infrastructure for people, for technology and so on. And so on. So we were more than competitive. So the experience, so this was the initial setup experience. Thereafter, lending, it's very interesting. Each country follows different ways in which proposals are originated, proposals are put up, and so on and so forth. And I must say that I was extremely proud that the process we have in India, where it goes through DA and is then given out to various development institutions for funding, is probably the most appropriate and most advanced in terms of the flow of projects and the monitoring of projects and so on. So the challenges were, I would think, binding together 5 cultures, getting the rating, raising money, going around. The lending part of it was easier, and but a whole lot more innovation is possible, because we very early on said we don't want to necessarily rely on dollar funding. So we look at local currency funding. So we raise local currencies to start within one member country, and then we said we will go to other countries. So a lot of options, lot of new things, and we introduced basically a rule where you said we will do a project in 90 days. Mm-hmm. So we said from start to finish. So, but it was accepted by the bank and by our borrowers.
In fact, this 90-day rule, I believe, was very famously, people who worked in ICICI Bank, I think, know this 90-day rule of yours. So how did this evolve, and how did this become a mantra of execution?
It's a very old story. I think but in the 90 days still relevant. It happened that I was somewhere in New York for some work, and McKinsey or somebody told me that they had a 1-day technology seminar, and that particular day I was flying out in the evening, so I want to attend it. So I attended it. And there, the seminar was all the .com guys, all startups in jeans and stuff. I'm the only guy in a suit. And these guys were talking about how they went about building things. And I heard them say 90 days. So I asked them, what is 90 days? From what point to what point? They said from conceptualization to market. So, of course, I asked a few questions and how and why. But I asked a very interesting question. Why this desperate speed? So the answer was very interesting. They said, we are very clear that when somebody thinks of an idea, there must be at least another 50 people with the same idea. The first one to market succeeds, others fail. So we run at this speed. So as I came back to Mumbai, and just about then we were implementing almost everybody has seen, what is called ICICI Web Trade, ICICI Direct, the trading platform. This is 98, 99. We were implementing it. I was given a timeline of 2 years and a few crores in cost. So I just told my colleagues that, look, there are new .coms being built in 90 days. So this one will be done in 90 days. Don't ask me how and why. We do it in 90 days. You won't believe it. 84th day they did the launch. And it cost us like 1/3 of what was originally bid out. So it then gave you courage that yes, you can work to a schedule if you set a tight timeline and delegate and tell them now you deliver. And it happened. And that engine continued the way it was for the next 15 or 20 years. I don't know when it was then upgraded or so. But the next one was even more interesting, the 90 days. And after that, we said for all projects it's 90 days. So some 6 months after this, ICICI, the parent, was listing on the New York Stock Exchange. And the merchant bankers had told me that 2 years, because you have to get your Indian accounts to US GAAP accounts, blah, 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 it will take 2 years. So finally one day I told them that my board gave approval. I said, we are going to do it in 90 days. So whoever thinks that you can't do it, goodbye. I'll shake hands and we'll find somebody else. So all the guys, the bankers, that is the investment bankers, all the accountants, the legal firms, everybody agreed. So I said, now you start. And we gave them some facility. The new building had just come up. So I said, I'll give you a hall this big. I'll put 25 mattresses. You will run 3 shifts. And there's a kitchen attached on that floor. So you'll have food 24 hours. And do it. And they actually worked on that. And the interesting synergy that we found was, they would work during the daytime, let's say preparing the legal documentation, give it to SEC US by end of day. And SEC next day would look at it, raise the queries, and get it to us by end of their day. And by the next day, which is our daytime, so every morning when SEC came to office, the answers were on the table. So they asked a question, how are you guys working? How is it that you are getting us reply the very next day? Long story short, again some 82nd or 83rd day, we had listed. And then 6 months later, we listed the bank. So we had 2 listings, ICICI Limited and ICICI Bank. We listed the bank. That we did in 63 days flat. So after that I said, anything that you want to do, you can do under 90 days. So what is stopping you is a mental block. It is not actually a physical block. That's how it came about.
Amazing template. Let's talk a little bit about your childhood, sir. If you were to go back to your parents, how would they describe you in your childhood, like a notorious child, or a naughty child, or a sincere, hardworking?
I think I was the latter. I was a hardworking child, and my parents put some sound, I would say, qualities and thought, and that became sense to me. So my dad always strove for leadership. So he wanted me to be a leader and in whatever you did, which is a good thing to have. And I think my first teacher in finance was my mother. And this is a true story that I am saying. So I was doing my engineering at NIT CHRONICLES, and once in a while I would smoke. So she found me smoking one day, and she didn't abuse me, she didn't fire me, so she asked a very gentle question. So she asked me, how many cigarettes do you smoke in a day? So I gave some number. So she said, how much does that cost? So I gave a number. So she said, on a monthly basis, how much does that work out to? I worked out a number. On an annual basis, I gave a number. I didn't know what was coming or what was happening. So I kept on answering. So she asked me a question. If you were to deposit a corpus in a bank, she put it in milder terminology, what would be that corpus to earn this much to smoke? So that's the first time I understood that you need a corpus to start with, and you need to earn on that corpus, and then you spend. So you can't be smoking away what you don't have. And that thought has stuck in my mind that our business that we are in is exactly the same thing. So you are borrowing, so you need to figure out how are you going to repay. So that these two things, leadership and this have stuck in my mind all through.
Did your parents give you any 90-day challenge?
Well, it's not 90 days, but I had to run my father's business when I was young. We had a roofing tile factory. If anybody has seen a Mangalore tile, it's a red tile. So our family had that business, and my dad was in politics, so he was busy, in his role. And so during my 5 years of engineering, I ran the factory also. So that's the first time I learned the challenges of an MSME. It was basically a small enterprise, not even an MSME. You learned what a balance sheet was. You learned that you had to repay your bank. You learned that end of the day, monthly basis, you have to make a profit because you have to pay interest and then service the loan and so on and so forth. So that stood me in good stead when I went to business school. So I won't say that was a 90-day rule or a challenge. It was a 5-year task that I did, which stood me in good stead and prepared me for finance, as it were.
So clearly these childhood experiences has shaped your career and life experiences eventually. You are a role model for many young people today, but in your growing years, did you sort of get inspired or influenced by some role model or a personality which shaped your thinking behavior?
Let me put it this way, that till I did my engineering, my thought was I'll get back to my family business, and just my younger brother and me, we will be running this business. But it's after I went to Ahmedabad to do my management studies that I had a wider exposure to things. And then I developed an interest in finance. And it is again just happened that my professor of finance sent my resume to ICICI. So that is the route I took to Swan. So once I went there, then I was in a way captivated. I wouldn't say by the world of finance, as it were. And I was lucky that I had good mentors. You didn't have good mentors, then you would have probably not have anything to look for. So my first remembrances of good mentors. Then later on, he became chairman of ICICI. Mr. Nadkarni became chairman of IDBI and of, I think, SEBI. So he was my first mentor, really. And he groomed me right through my first, I would say, almost 14 years of my career and handled me. And then you could see what was possible to do in India. And that itself became an opportunity. But yet you were operating in a closed environment. So you really did not see what could be done from the opportunity, the India opportunity. There was nowhere that you could see an India opportunity. The opportunity that was India you saw only much later in the 90s when I would say the technology revolution started. I'll put it in this way that 88 I went to work for the Asian Development Bank. The next 8 years I spent in Southeast Asia. One of my first assignments from the ADB was in China to look at what is today probably the largest bank in the world, or at one time was ICBC. So, and then in Chinese industry, I can say that in 88, Indian banks were far ahead of the Chinese system. So you can do things in a very quick period of time, and you can do. So everything that I saw in various countries became a learning experience and trying to see how you can do it. So, for example, you asked for something that is a role model. Not a role model, but in Southeast Asia, I saw that at around 500 plus per capita income, the country starts to move and aspirations move. So the people of the country want to, say, buy a home, things to put in the home, buy a motorcycle, buy a car, and so on and so forth. So I said, when that happens in India, there's an opportunity. And by 97, 98 or 96, I came in. 97, 98, it was clear to me that the next thing happening in India was retail. Because my estimate was by 2002, 2003, we would be at around $500 per capita. So we need to move to that India and cater to that. And that's what, that learning from there gave a pointer that we can do retail in India, and we actually launched it. And that's how you build things by learning from others, seeing what it is, connecting dots and growing.
Interesting. Sir, also it is very evident now that more and more women are, breaking the glass ceiling and becoming more successful, they bring very unique skills to the leadership table. You have a terrific track record of grooming leaders very early, and many of the women leaders who you have groomed are now CEOs across multiple organizations. So, could you share, some insights on what sort of a environment did you foster which promoted gender diversity, and what is it that you did to identify talent, and then how did you sort of groom it?
There are two parts to this really. One is gender neutrality, but I'll come to that. I don't call it gender equality. If you are neutral, then things happen. And I'll explain. So we had a good number of women in ICICI, and that was due to neutrality that had been brought in. Particularly later years, Mr. Bagul was our chairman, and recruitment was open. So when I came back in '96, there were young talent, women leaders who were either graduates in various subjects or accountancy qualification, management qualification, who were there at the slate. We had to do two things. One is we had to get our evaluation process right, not necessarily only for women. So one of the early things we did in '96, '97 was reset our evaluation exercise to match what was done elsewhere in the world. Appropriate feedback, appropriate rating, appropriate, and so on. At that point in time, you see a different slate of people than who were there earlier. So you see women coming up there because you now have a very formal way of evaluation. That's the first part. Then comes a trickier part, and that trickier part is making sure that in terms of career opportunity, you are neutral, and in terms of thereafter growth, you are neutral. That's the toughest one that most companies or most corporates find difficult to. So it comes from recruitment and a bias that this job can't be done by a lady. The moment you have that bias, you are finished. So you have to have a mindset that any job can be done by either a woman or a man. So you do that, you are well on the way to succeed. Then comes the evaluation. You have to have fair and evaluation which is appropriate. Then comes the next challenge, which is job posting and there again you need to be sure that you have no biases in your mind. This is all that we did, and we were pretty anywhere where we thought that a lady can't do a job, we were proven wrong. In the sense, if HR had this job, we found that if you ask a lady, she will not say that she can't do that job. Or if, let's say ICICI used to work 2 shifts, 8 to 8. And so women and men both worked the same shift. We didn't differentiate. And one of my colleagues was our joint managing director, Mrs. Gupte. She would get, I'll just tell this as a lighter vein. She would get calls that, my daughter is working or my daughter-in-law is working and she's coming home at 10 o'clock and so on and so forth. And Mrs. Gupta would tell me about this, and I said, you handle it in your own way. And she would first call the concerned lady and talk to her and say that, look, so-and-so called. And invariably, so I'm not generalizing, but invariably the feedback she would say was that the young lady would be hostile to the family and say, who are they to tell me what to do? Who are they to tell me? And then she had to counsel them. No, please, that's not what we mean. Is there anything we can do? And so on and so forth. But very interestingly, a lot of innovation came out of this. So, for example, I used to virtually push people that if the branch closes at 8 o'clock, why are you making people stay till 9:30? So the end of day closure. I said, what is end of day closure? No, we have to reconcile everything and then system has to be handed over. So those days were not continuous processing. So I said, I am unhappy with this. If it is 8 o'clock, you have to leave at 8:05. Then at least I have a face to say that, look, we are not asking people to, but no solution from a male-oriented world. So one day I was in, I remember still the branch. I was in our Mount Road branch, and I used to, when I went to a branch, I would ask this question, because I was obsessed. what time did you hand over the system? And it was a lady branch manager who was there. And I asked this question, what time did you hand over the system? Yesterday. And this was at around 7:30 in the night. So she said, 8:05. I actually sat down. I said, how did this happen? And she said, and you see how simple it was, but nobody had thought of this. She said the most time was because we have a teller operation going on till 8 o'clock. Everything then gets sorted out. I won't go into much detail. That takes time, and then book closure and so on. So she said that the second shift starts at 2 o'clock. So I said at 6 o'clock we'll have a shift change. Again, one more, just for the teller operation. And we will reconcile all the other things. 2 to 6, what had happened, we will reconcile. And 6 to 8 is a lighter node. So we can do it very quickly or in parallel. So the truth is that 8:05 I handed over the system. So I asked, today what time will you hand over the system? 8:05. So I said, now we introduce this as standard operating practice throughout the bank. So there are innumerable such things, because we had this diversity and we had the blend of talent and need and solution nothing that we could get right. Otherwise, I think you would have been happy to finish job at 9:30 and go home at 10. So
talking about talent, since you're saying, and there are many people who are listening, you who are posted in tier 3, tier 4 cities as we talk today. Or let me ask the question actually slightly differently. If you were to go back and become a 20-year-old and let's say be posted in one of the tier 3, tier 4 city branches of Bank of Baroda, having seen a terrific successful career, what is the advice you would give it to your younger 20-year-old today?
you see, I'll answer it in this way, that today I think there's a bigger opportunity to serve the customer in a tier 3 city. Let me take tier 3 as an example, than in a top tier city. Because, and actually I would say if you go down to a village level, there's a much bigger opportunity. Now, do you have the tools to serve is a different question. We can look at that also. The reason I'm saying this is that they do not have the exposure to financial products that we would have in a tier 1 city. That itself is a big opportunity. For example, if it is your customer is only having a savings account, I'm talking of a financial conglomerate which has got very many products. At some stage, that customer in that village has to go beyond a bank savings account to something else which, an investment structure which grows. Now, go back 10 years, 15 years, it was not possible. You did not have the reach, you did not have the connectivity. Today you have the reach, you have the connectivity. Then you would not have the ability to service that customer. Because how does he goes into a SIP or whatever, how does he look up, how does he get his balance? He doesn't know anything about this, he is lost. Unless the bank app is there. But today, you have an app like MF Central, which you press a button and you know all your holdings at one go. And this can be used by a person in a large city or in that village. So I would look at what is it that I can serve this customer in terms of a wider range of products. I'm going a little beyond banks to say that this is how we will bring up the country in terms of reaching to the people who are at, I would say, the middle of the pyramid and below. Because to me, that's the biggest opportunity to serve today. The top of the pyramid is getting, they are already served. So you'll have to figure out how to serve them better, but there's a large opportunity middle of the pyramid and below, which you can really serve.
Sure. So, all of us know and the whole world knows your successes, but they say failure is a stepping stone to success. So would you like to share some examples of some failures or setbacks you had in your career, and how did you transcend that, phase of disappointment?
See, failure and challenges always happens. It is not necessarily failures. It is shock. A banker's life, all of you would understand, is full of shocks. So basically, you need to have the ability to withstand that shock. And I found that shock happens when there is something important that you have to do. A shock happens and you have to go out and talk to talk somewhere, you have to do things. So your ability to gather yourself, collect yourself, and focus on the next big thing and do it is what you need to work on. So I think shock and challenge has happened multiple times. For us, probably the biggest shock and challenge was probably the Lehman crisis, when because Lehman happened, all banks were hit, and because we were abroad, we were hit with a whole lot of things. Bank of Baroda would have been too, but we were hit, and particularly by the regulators, and the regulators basically asking for capital and increase and so on. So at one stage, because we had the capital, so at one stage in both Canada and London subsidiary, we had probably 40% capital adequacy.
Oh.
And a year later, we had to say that we are going to bring back the capital because we don't need this capital. And given what has happened, we don't want to really grow too much here. We will grow, but we don't want to grow. We didn't lose money, but we didn't want to grow because we saw that things turn very fast, and then you need to. So you need to be able to withstand these shocks and carry on. But to me, the biggest shock was probably the Lehman shock, and you were hit on various sides. Domestically, there was a challenge. Domestically, the markets collapsed. Globally, the regulators were. So you had an all-round situation to handle.
Okay, excellent. We'll move to the last round, sir, and then we'll throw open for some questions. So, if not banking, what is an alternate career you would have chosen?
What I would have liked to do is probably become a motor car racer. I am giving a very honest answer because right from my engineering days, I was captivated by Formula One and motorsports and so on. But that's probably wishful thinking. You get a career and you move on. At some stage in your life, you stop dreaming about it also. So life takes you on a different journey. But that's the only alternative career I would have thought of.
It's okay. India's probably lost a F1 star, but we got a banking star. Okay. Any major opportunity which you think you missed out in the last so many years?
See, I think I have been very lucky in that context. So I'll touch 3 points to show. Sometimes, of course, hard work is a given, so you have to work very hard. So I was working, I mentioned Mr. Nadkarni. He was, at this point in time, 1980, he was chairman of ICICI, and I was his executive assistant. So one day he calls me into his room and he said, you go to London and for 6 months. I said, why do I go to London? He said, I want you to start leasing. And there's hardly anybody doing leasing. So he had already talked to somebody, a large firm, which was doing leasing. And he says, so like you go on a secondment, they will receive you and they will. So that was it. So I went to London. I spent 6 months. I learned leasing and came. But that actually set me on the technology path. Because I found there that I did all sorts of work there. Coding things, and there were a whole lot of things that they were doing on the computer. Early stage, you can think of 80. And I came back and I told Mr. Nadkarni that I need a computer because I can't work out the quotation. I can work it out by hand, but it's like working out a P&L, then a cash flow, then discounting that cash flow and so on, and using a calculator. It's going to take me 2 hours to do one, and by that 1 week I am behind in quotations. I need a computer. So very reluctantly he said, okay, you will do it only for computation. Because though he was a brilliant mind, he was an engineer, somehow he was a bit uncomfortable with the mainframe that we used to borrow at times from for certain things from, I think, LIC those days. So anyway, so I said I want a computer, and that's where my journey started. So we put, in the leasing department, we had an old, what sat on your table, an 8086 computer we would talk, tabletop type of thing, single unit. And we had the equivalent of Excel on it, we had the equivalent of Word on it, database on it, all sorts of things. And so you actually ran the whole business out on single computer. The department was only 3 people. The leasing department was 3 people. We had independent bank account. We were separately audited, though it was merged. It was not a subsidiary. So you learned a whole lot of things in this. You kept your own books. You were audited by separately. You dealt with the bank, and you ran technology. So that became a huge turning point for me in terms of my life, I would think, the biggest turning point. The second biggest one was with Mr. Wagul when I went to Asian Development Bank. Somebody from Asian Development Bank called me and said that we have a role for you, will you join? I said, let me talk to my boss. So I talked to Mr. Wagul and he said, we'll discuss this. So this was like in July or so of a year, 87. Then one day in February 88, he asked me, what has happened to ADB? I said, nothing has happened to ADB. So he says, why don't you go for 2 years, I'll give you a lien and come back. So I called ADB and said, we thought that you had already done your paperwork. I said, no, we'll do the paperwork now. Anyway, I was there and that gave me the exposure to Southeast Asia, including China. Then by then, the Southeast Asian company that transformed those countries, so that gave me the exposure. So I think those two exposures created, I would think, the foundation for maybe what little bit I was able to do post 98 once I came back here. My BRICS Bank experience is much older in the day, but that also is a very interesting experience. Learning to deal with 5 cultures and 5 countries and carrying that through.
Okay,
but I still count it as a huge learning. The BRICS Bank exposure is a huge learning.
Okay, a little bit more spicy questions on Bollywood. Any favorite hero or a heroine?
Raj Kapoor was my favorite for a long time.
Okay. Any heroine?
Heroine those days would be Nutan, because I think she was a classic actress. I think both. Raj Kapoor also was a classic actor.
We have a lot of young people. Anybody of this era?
This era, see, I said this to Shah Rukh Khan once, and he was interviewing me, same sort of thing, rapid fire. He was at one time over brand, and he didn't like it when I said Raj Kapoor was not me. I said, look, I'm older than you, so I have to tell you the truth. So I told him this with a large audience.
Okay. Any sports icon you admire?
Yeah, I used to, my younger days, tennis was something I followed. Those days it was Ramanathan Krishnan, who is no longer active. His son was active, but that was what I would look forward to in the 60s.
Okay. And your, hobbies, spare time, how do you sort of utilize it?
Yeah, see, it has moved over a period of time. But the common thread there is learning. So whatever spare time I have, I learn. If I travel somewhere, if I go around, see a country, the primary objective is to understand what has been happening, the atmosphere and so on, and learning. So all hobbies are through are a way to learn something different and something new. So for example, last 2-3 years, various stages. Google has been my teacher for a long time. But I think now YouTube has been my teacher. YouTube also relaxes me before going to sleep and also teaches me. So whatever I want, I just keyword I put in and I get a whole lot of things. So I pick what I want out of it. I don't pick everything that I want to. If I want to go on a world tour, I just, with the COVID and all, we couldn't go out. You go onto a site of a blogger and you will see, and Indian bloggers are now very active. If any of you must have, a lot of you would have seen. These guys have been going around the world on a shoestring, and they showcase in 25 minutes a country that you might not have been to. Not only outside, but even India. You will see parts of Arunachal which you can't imagine how good it looks and what it is like. So you can learn what is happening, development that is happening, trends that are happening. So I use technology. I use again is to look for technology and technology development. So everything is a learning experience. So it gives you joy, but it has to give you some learning. And I think both are equally important.
All of us are students for life. One last question, sir, before we open up. If you were to host a dinner for 3 famous people, living or dead, who would you invite?
That's a tough one. I have not thought of that. But I would think that I would pick somebody from a technology world, somebody from the financial services world, and a political leader. Let me just say that.
Okay.
I would think that would be a very interesting conversation that you would have.
I'm sure. I think we can auction that dinner whenever you decide that.
Thank you.
So we'll just open it for questions if people have to ask.
Yeah, somebody there.
Dipti?
Yeah. So we have 300 plus live questions from the
my
audience. So I would want to take 4-5 of them first and then we open up.
Okay.
That'll be better. Yeah. So we have a question from Mr. Chirag Patel. He's asked, what is the future of public sector banks in the next 20 years? And believe me, this is the 50th time I've read this question.
No, I think I'll give you an honest answer. We cannot do without public sector banks because the foundation that they have built and the reach that they have built cannot be equaled. A. B. The trust that they have built cannot be equal. C. Trust not only with your customer but with the regulator. So given this, this is a foundational institution and it cannot be done away. So what could you do to really move the needle, as it were? Embrace technology, that's all. And that, I think, is happening at a good pace now.
Sure, sir. Next is by K. Tanya. She's asked, as one of the founding member and visionary of ICICI Bank, what would be your advice to young bankers in Bank of Baroda, where they are competing both with PSUs as well as private banks in the ecosystem? What should be their vision?
Yeah, I think their vision should be the young India. You're a young banker, is the young India, and how India will transform over the 25 years. That is the Amrit Kal period, which is in India growing at around 10% per annum, which means that every 7 years your GDP should double. And you just imagine the opportunity that this will give you. And to that young banker, I would say, stay current with the technology and new things that are happening, and your bank will find good use for you and give you all the opportunities that you want. Stay on top of the game, particularly the technology game.
Sure, sir. That's a very good advice. Mr. Anupam Singh has asked, how will and how is AI going to change the future of banking?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. AI, I believe, for a large part, will not replace humans. It will replace certain human tasks. I'll explain that because being bankers. So what was banking when I came in? But I won't spend too much time. I'll spend 1 minute on it. It was everything in the branch. The books were also kept in the branch. So when we said we will do a back office, there was skepticism. And what will happen to the branch? Has anything happened to the branch? The branch thrives. Then we moved to the back office. Then we had more people in the back office than in the front office. So what will happen to the back office when you go straight through technology? Oh, no, what will happen to them? Nothing. So that they got reskilled and went on to something else. The numbers never came down. So there is always a need for human capital, and that's not going to come down. I think we need to adapt ourselves to the new equilibrium, and life will go on. Numbers have not come down. The staffing numbers have not come down anywhere.
Absolutely.
So this is an interesting one. Mr. Deepak Kohli has asked, please suggest some really good books and material to become a good leader like yours.
I will suggest just one book, which is not necessarily a book on leadership, but it is on learnings and behavior. It's a book called which has influenced me a lot. I would say that's the one book it's called Thinking Fast and Slow, by an author called Daniel Kahneman. Daniel Kahneman, this is a Nobel Prize winning book. He's a behavioral psychologist or a behavioral economist, and the reason I say it was important was when I read it, my children were already grown up. I said to myself, I would have been a much better parent if I had read this book, or if this book was there when my children were growing up. So it's not only a book for children, it's not, don't misuse me, and it's a book that I love to use in my banking applications also. It tells you so many nuances of human nature that you don't believe is correct. But when you do an experiment, you realize that the book is not a book, it's a book of experiments. Some, 200 experiments put in 1.5 pages, absolutely readable. Thinking Fast and Slow.
Absolutely. We just lost him a few days back, Daniel Kahneman.
Yeah, he passed away a couple of weeks back.
Yeah, so now we'll open the floor for the audience to ask questions. Can we have the mics here, please?
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Kamath sir. You have been an inspiration, as Sumansi sir has already told. Personally, at my level, when I joined bank in the year 1999, I had been chasing, following you from one another. So two questions I am going to, not a questions, just my personal, this thing I want to ask. One is that we have heard the term domestically systematic important banks like ICICI, SDFC and SBI. So I personally brand you as a domestically systematic important person as far as banking sector is concerned and financial sector is concerned. So how does a person at the age of, when I saw the Google, you were 76, 77 running, right? So 77, post-retirement 17 years, right? And still you are valued more than what before your retirement age. So what are the key drivers? How to achieve that? In a very layman language, if you can explain, a lot of things you have given, I have taken the note of it also. One thing. And second thing is your contribution, especially in the COVID time, with the restructuring package for the MSME sector. It was a game changer when the package was announced. I went through the package in totality when I found out how the intense research which have been taken, and with I think within 90 days period only you would have done this. So these two things for my personal learning I just want to know. Thank you so much.
The first question is simple. You don't stop learning. So your mind is young, and you apply that mind to the extent that somebody gives you an opportunity. So for example, I was 60, maybe 68 or 69 when I was asked whether I would set up BRICS Bank in Shanghai. So it didn't take me long to answer that question because I was current, my mind was current, and I looked at what I could learn by setting it up. So be current, be aware, be continuously learn and go on. The restructuring package, there are two or three packages. The MSME package was not what we worked on. We worked on the expert committee to restructure. That also required work, and that was for the larger companies. But there the story is very interesting. And it's the story of India, and that to me is a very telling story. So when we did the initial analysis, we estimated that, and this is analysis by data from the banks, rating agencies, our own looking at industry associations and so on. We thought that around 9 lakh crores of assets will need to be restructured. 9 lakh crores. This is June 2020. In the end, 1 year later, it was so we put the whole structure in within 60 days or something, and we started looking at the proposals. In the end, 1 year later, the scheme ended. The total amount done was only 45,000 crores, 5%. So what is the magic? You may say that it was not workable. No, everybody had turned around. Corporate India had turned around, and to me that's an untold story of corporate India. Corporate India not only turned around, they repaid all their dues. The bank balance sheets became clean. Of course, the government had put in some capital, but bank balance sheets became clean. Their own balance sheets became clean, and so on. And I'll only say one line, what did corporate India do during the first 6 months of COVID? They became significantly more efficient than earlier. So much so that their EBITDA margins increased by some 20-25%. Correct. They worked with lesser people because people are not there. So they had some automation, process change and so on. So that story is remarkable. So the success of the scheme was that it didn't get used that much. The successes of corporate India, they did the thing. The second question was related to?
Regarding at the age of even 76 years, how you are able to maintain the agility and the...
Remain young. Remain young. Thank you.
Next question, anyone from the audience? Amit, can we have the mic here?
Yeah, good afternoon. Mr. Kamath, you were a part of the entire business of converting ICICI into ICICI Bank. The universal banking concept actually came 2 decades back. And the belief at that point of time was that development banking wasn't sustainable. Okay. And now we've gone through 25 years since the concept of universal banking came through. We've seen a number of financial institutions which have come up, like say IDFC, which finally got converted into a bank. And now we're talking of NABFID coming up as a DFI. So how have things actually changed, which actually makes us feel, because I think NABFID is going to play a very critical role when we're talking of the future of India, infrastructure investment. Probably banks are not really up to providing this kind of thing. It has to be back to the DFIs. So how have things actually come around to full circle?
It's a very good question. Madan, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, Madan, my old colleague.
That's
Yeah. No, I'll put it this way. NABFID is happening at the right time. In the sense that why did ICICI, IDBI, IFCI tail off in the 1990s? There's no access to money. So what was our funding? Our funding was basically government guaranteed bonds, which we issued and banks subscribed. And that was eligible as SLR security. So that was the funding. In 90s, when the government said that is no longer available, you had to shut shop. And not only shut shop, you had a whole lot of NPS to deal with. So we had to reinvent ourselves. We reinvented ourselves first. So we said we will become retail, we will raise money from the market. And of course, there was a bank, we will grow the bank. I won't go into all those things. So all that happened. And others followed a little later. Then, if you cut back to 2 years back or 3 years back, 2 years back now, if you are looking at the next 25 years, the biggest growth driver is going to be infrastructure. And if you look at commercial banks and infrastructure funding, there's a complete mismatch. Because as banks, our average maturity or tenor is 1 year. If you look at a blend of CASA and fixed deposits that you have. And you are expected to lend 10 years. You are carrying a mismatch because of course you will reprice the loan also frequently, but then the borrower is carrying a mismatch. So you have I would say a situation which is not tenable. So you need to have long-term money. And the long-term money has to come from the capital market and somebody has to give it back. So when ICICI Bank and IDBI Bank didn't have access to the capital market, that access is now available because of monies that are now coming through the long-term saving side of the market, as it were. So even when IDFC was set up, the same challenge was there. It was no different from an IFC or an ICICI those days. But today the situation is different. You have got a capital market which can provide a lot of whatever resources you want, actually, I would say, long-term, maturity that you want, again, longer-term maturities, new structures like InvITs and so on, and so on. So I would think that the idea of a long-term development bank was right timed by the government. The government picked absolutely the right time. 3-4 years earlier, too early. And that's right time now. And I hope there will be more such institutions which come out and become intermediaries in providing long-term funding. So I see commercial banks coming in at the shorter tenor, and the longer tenors, institutions like NABFID coming along, more institutions like NABFID coming along.
Today in the paper I read that small finance banks, they want to get converted into universal banks. So does this mean that this niche banking or differentiated banking which came up some time back, is that concept less relevant? Because even the payments banks probably are not doing that well. Now if SFBs find out that only lending to SMEs is not a tenable business, so are we again going round the full circle?
The key here is to make sure that they operate in a manner that the regulator is comfortable with. So that I think is the key for whether it's a SFB or a payments bank. The SFB, again, all banks have to enjoy regulator's trust. Then the regulator will allow you. Issue of the regulator always says our principal responsibility is depositor. So till that is there, I think getting into new products is going to be challenging. But if you go to payments banks, I think there's a very interesting opportunity there because there is a large mass of Indians who are yet not served. Probably a rough guess, half the villages in India, banking correspondent is the way to go. So one will have to see how to serve that mass and the opportunity that will come in with that mass as you go through Amrit Kal, because don't look at it as a 4 trillion economy. Look at it an 8 trillion, 10 trillion economy and what that would offer. So I think we will see very interesting opportunities coming up in banks. And the regulator, I'm sure, will allow people to access these opportunities in a calibrated way.
Sir, pure nostalgia. Now that I'm in BOB, I thought let me take this advantage of learning from you from at ICICI and what now we have to learn post ICICI from you. In our days, those days, you said that if you retain your leadership position of number 1, you must ensure that the number 2 and number 3 additions should be less than number 1 position.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's the mantra that I remember. Now, in today's world, when technology, customer service, and pricing are, given, how do we maintain that gap? I'm not seeing that gap because today, every year, the leadership position and league tables change. So, what is the key driver to now maintain the leadership position? That's it.
Yeah, today is a very interesting question. I think the number equation now becomes even more sharp, and it is then, you put on top of it the technology equation. So how is the leadership fanning out in context of what technology allows you to do and how techno-savvy is the leader? So I think we will have to overlay both these things to drive the new opportunity. And that's not easy because there are some natural constraints to changing or putting in new technology and so on, because only then will things happen. So I remember asking a global banker long back, why aren't you not moving away from mainframes? The answer was very interesting. He says the question that pops up is whose neck is on the line. So my technology head says not my neck. So and of course if I am the CEO, I start thinking should it be my head? So then finally you decide nobody's head, so we are not going to do that. But somebody has to get this ball rolling to get this done. So I would think the key is to have skills to do what we did and not clutter up the numbers. Don't make it top heavy, in simple English.
I think in the interest of time, we have just got one last question and we'll have to end it there. Amit, behind you.
Thank you. This is an extension to what Madan asked. Now in today's times we are seeing a lot of fintechs actually trying to cater to the unbanked, as you said, people lying in tier 3, even in Africa. In fact, there are fintechs who are directly focusing only on a street vendor or a bhel puri wala kind of a thing. And obviously these are not right now in the target of banks. At what stage do you think that banks would try to serve this kind of a customer? Or will it be like how the relationship is between an NBFC and a bank, where the bank finances an NBFC and NBFC does the further lending? So do you think that will be the ecosystem coming up, or banks would try and find a way to cater to these customers?
Very, very good question. Excellent question. There are two parts to this question, two answers to this question. One is when banks get the technology that the fintech has to reach that customer. When you do that, you can do what the fintech is doing. And I'll spend a minute on that. It is possible to do it. Because this technology, there is no rocket science. You need to figure out how to use it without disturbing your existing technology. Because as I said, you want to disturb your existing technology, the question is whose neck is on the line. But so you'll have to figure out how to use current technology like the fintechs are using. And then I think the second part is you need to be, as a banker, ultimately you will say, what is my ROE? So I need to earn on that thing. Until that happens, and that I'm sure will happen quickly, because as you go down the bottom of the pyramid, you need to get an appropriate return, income, which will provide you that ROE from that customer transaction. So moment that happens, and I think we are talking of at least the second part, in the next 1 year, fintechs will also do better because I'm sure they will have better returns on what they are doing. Some of it is not permitted for a variety of reasons today. So that income stream has to happen. The technology equation also has to be resolved. So then it will happen.
Thank you so much, sir. It truly has been an illuminating session. May I have a huge round of applause for this fireside chat? So thank you for your insightful contributions and thought-provoking perspectives. I'm confident all of us tuned in this conversation have been deeply inspired. I will now request our executive directors to please come on the stage and Mr. Chand, sir, to graciously present our guest with a symbolic gesture, an eco-friendly plant that symbolizes our commitment to banking for a greener planet.
Thank you. And before I want to thank one of your colleagues whom you seconded to NAPFID, who actually held our hand. I can say you, it is Mrinal Goswami. He did an outstanding, is he here today? He did an outstanding job, and I can honestly say it because that was not easy, because with a team of 7 or 8 people to handle entire treasury, and you have 25,000 crores that has come in from the government to deploy it and run it. He did a remarkable job. So thank the bank and thank your colleagues. Thank you. Thank you.
So we will also like to present a book as a token of heartfelt gratitude for participating in this April session of Leadership Chronicles.
Thank you. You want me to open it? No, it's okay. I will look at it.
Yeah.
Okay, then you're done. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you then. It was...
Thank you, sir. It was really insightful.
Can I take this out? Maybe?
As we conclude today, we extend our deepest appreciation for our guest, Shri K.V. Kamath sir, for sharing his experiences, insights, and wisdom with us. We also extend our heartfelt gratitude to all our clients, partners, and colleagues.